Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It's Monday, February 13th, 2017. It's Coach K's birthday. I'm now irritated, and I'm your host this week, Sam Klein. I am joined as usual by Donald Wine in Washington, D.C.
Hey, happy birthday, Coach K. 70 big ones. That's what's up.
And Jason Evans in Atlanta.
You know, we should have figured out a way. We should have skipped a podcast along the way so that we could have done the 70th podcast on Coach K's 70th birthday. That is bad planning on our part.
Sorry, Coach.
Yeah, you are correct. So we have a lot to get to today. Our agenda kind of slowly built up over the last couple of days, and I think now we have more individual topics to talk about than we may have ever had before. So
it is busy. It is busy.
We're going to start, of course, with the game Thursday night against North Carolina. It was a great game on ESPN. It was back and forth the whole way. Duke ended up pulling away at the very end and winning by 8. So I'll start with Jason. Your impressions from a UNC game that was one of the most entertaining games I think we've seen this year as Duke fans.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Like, for us, we go, wow, that was a ton of fun. What a fabulous game. And I'm sure Carolina fans are just beating their heads against the wall. They're really upset because it was a game that could have gone either way, although it really felt like, I don't want to say Duke was in control, but you felt like Duke was the better team throughout most of this game, and we had the lead throughout most of the game. I want to harken back to last week when we were each sort of saying our keys to the game, and I'm sure you guys will recall my key was rebounding. And I pointed out that North Carolina is the best rebounding team in the country. They average like 44 rebounds a game, and they're the second best offensive rebounding team in the country. They average 14, 16, something like that. 16, I think, offensive rebounds per game. Well, in this game, Carolina only got 7 offensive rebounds. They only got 30 total rebounds. Duke out-rebounded them. I want you to dwell on that for a moment. Duke out-rebounded Carolina 31-30. We had the same number of offensive boards as they did. It is if you had told me in advance that was going to happen, I would have put tremendous amounts of money on the Blue Devils to win the game, and that's what happened. Carolina usually grabs almost 45% of their misses on offense. They only grabbed 25% of them against Duke. And if you want a reason that we won, that's the biggest reason that we won. We controlled the boards. And then the other statistical thing that I saw that I really loved, and look, everyone's going to talk about, we had 3 guys who really lit it up on offense. We were great from three-point range, 13 of 27, 48% on our three-pointers. Both teams shot really, really well in this game. But the other thing I wanted to point out was I really loved our bench play. We got 37 minutes from Giles, Bolden, and Jackson. They combined to shoot 7 of 7 from the field. They got 6 rebounds, and they committed a grand total of 1 turnover, and they had 3 block shots. And I thought Giles and Bolden both were at times intimidating on the inside. Now, look, I'm not ready to say that, you know, Duke has the great bench that we thought they would at the beginning of the season. We are still bothered by injuries. We are still bringing guys along slowly, and there's no question that Giles and Bolden are not where anyone thought they would be. You know, when everyone was talking about top 5 picks, lottery picks, sure thing first rounders. But they are rounding into form more and more. They're giving Duke quality minutes in each and every game. And I love the trajectory of this team. And before I'll hand it over to Donald in 1 second, but I want you all to recall and think about one thing really quickly. If you take out an insane, crazy loss to NC State that is absolutely inexplicable, that no one can figure out at this point when you look at the trajectory of the two teams, if you take that game out, Duke would currently be tied with Carolina. Actually, I guess we'd be ahead because we'd have the tiebreaker. We would be 9-3 in the ACC. We'd be 20-4 overall, the only team in the ACC with 4 or fewer losses. And I'm convinced we would still be in the top 10, and everyone would still be talking about Duke as a very, very, very likely national title contender. It's sort of like one game has skewed a lot of our view, and we're gradually beginning to return to the normalcy of Duke being one of the top teams in the country. All right, enough of that. Hey, Donald, what did you love about this Carolina game?
Look, I'm going to start out with this. If you are a neutral observer, you probably saw a lot of the hoopla behind this game, and you're probably tuning in thinking, okay, you know, Duke was supposed to be number 1 in the country. They're supposed to be the best team, and they have had a down year so far this year by Duke standards. North Carolina is this team that, you know, was pretty good, but they really haven't been lighting the world on fire lately. And why should I be watching this game? If you watch this game Thursday night as a neutral observer, that was a damn great game to watch. I mean, just take out the stats, take out everything like we said last week. This was a game to watch. It was a game that went back and forth, even though it kind of felt, I don't want to say comfortable because there's never a comfortable lead against North Carolina. This game had everything in it. It had rebounding. It had great play. It had people shooting the ball well. It had great defense at times. It had some highlight moments. Kennedy Meeks, rest in peace. Those sort of things are what make basketball great to watch, and we had all of that and more in this game. So I think just from a watching standpoint, this was one of the better games of college basketball this year to watch, and I thought it was great that we ended up on the winning side of things, because I think that was a really big confidence builder for this team. I think the one thing I look at on the stats, first of all, I think, like you said, that Harry Giles and Frank Jackson did very great off the bench. That is something that has been sorely needed over the last couple of weeks, and I think that's something that we got from them. Luke Kennard was excellent. Grayson Allen was excellent. Jason Tatum was excellent. Emil Jefferson, even though he only had 2 points, I thought the stats were lying when it told how well he kind of played. I think he was really good at quarterbacking the defense, especially when we had some of these small runs that kind of ended up being the difference in the game. He was really instrumental with that. Him and Matt Jones, their defense and their quarterbacking on defense is what got everybody to calm down after the kind of frantic first couple minutes and get everybody settled into playing basketball.
We gave up 78 points, but I thought we played one of our better defensive games of the year.
I agree.
Yeah,
we had 6 block shots.
And add that. Go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say we had 6 block shots, which is a lot for a Duke team, and especially against a Carolina team that is long, has some pretty good size, and typically doesn't have a lot of shots blocked. Go ahead, Sam. Your turn to chime in on a very, very fun game.
Oh, yeah, I think that it was exactly as you said. We gave up a lot of points, but at the same time, the defense played really well, and North Carolina, uncharacteristically, made a lot of shots from the mid-range and from outside that I don't think you see them normally make. So even though they outperformed in that way, that's kind of the way you have to beat North Carolina, and we attacked them inside. We, as you mentioned, we were able to somehow end up with the positive rebounding margin, which I think very few opponents have against UNC this year. And the thing that I had talked about in the preview, if we're going to go back and review our previews, was that Duke needed to be able to slow down that passing game, needed to be able to slow down Carolina in transition. And as I said, most of their points were coming from outside and were coming out of sort of set plays. There wasn't a lot of that Carolina transition offense that everyone is so used to getting beaten up by. We didn't suffer that. We didn't suffer from that based on the rebounding margin, and that's really where a lot of UNC's points come from. They get out in transition and they're able to get the offensive rebounds and put them back. And there was really not much of that. Obviously, missing Isaiah Hicks didn't help them, but even with the guys they did have, I think that UNC is, as we know, certainly capable of beating this Duke team. They have a lot of power inside, and Duke was able to neutralize all that. The other 2 things I wanted to throw at you guys that I thought were interesting, if you just knew about this game, that Emil Jefferson scored, 2 points and was saddled with foul trouble most of the game, and Grayson Allen fouled out with a little over a minute left. If you knew those 2 things about a particular Duke game, especially a Duke game against a really good opponent, you would think that Duke isn't able to weather that, and Allen fouling out with a minute left against a good team probably means that he's working too hard, and then we don't have that minute for him to shine at the end. But that wasn't even the case. I mean, he came out and it was still like a 3 or 4 point game, but as you guys said, it felt like Duke was kind of in control of those last few minutes. So I was really impressed with the way the Blue Devils were able to control the rebounding game, as we talked about, and that they made UNC shoot from outside. And even though, like you said, Jason, even though they scored 78 points, really great defensive effort from Duke. And I don't think either of you mentioned Bolden's really ferocious block and steal, right? That was
sweet. That was sweet.
Donald can talk all you want about the death of Kennedy Meeks at the hands of Jason Tatum's slam, but I think that Bolden's block and steal was my favorite highlight of the game.
I can get with that. I can definitely get behind that.
It was way up there.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's funny. when you look at statistics, you talked about, Jefferson only had 2 points. Grayson Allen fouled out. Uncle Matt Jones only had 3 points. And when you look at stats, there's so many other stats that point to a different result than what happened. Carolina. You guys know Carolina only turned the ball over 5 times in that game. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, that is really impressive. Considering the pace that they play at, Sam, I think you were talking about what an impressive passing team they are. They're really they did a great job of controlling the ball. It was, as you gentlemen said, an incredibly well played game. We were fortunate to get to watch it and fortunate to be the team that came out on top. And we're in great shape now, I think, in the ACC. I'm not certain. I haven't looked at all the tiebreakers, but I think we're pretty close to controlling our own fate at this point, which is all you can really ask, with 6 games or so left. Are we about to move on to Clemson?
Yeah.
I get the sense we are, huh?
Yes, I was about to move to Clemson, which I don't think is going to be as happy of a discussion. Although hopefully we can wash the concerns away. So Duke, after playing Thursday night against UNC and having the bonfire and all these things, was up early on Saturday for a 1 p.m. matchup against Clemson. And as I think a lot of Duke fans maybe foresaw, this had a little bit of that trap game in it, right? North Carolina on Thursday night, Clemson about 36 hours later, with a game against UVA, one of the top teams in the conference, coming up this week, and we'll talk about that soon. But you could see Duke being prone to overlooking this Clemson team, and sure enough, it was a close game all the way through. Clemson actually had a shot at the end to win the game. Duke only won by 2 points. Donald, is there anything concerning from the Clemson game that you think can't be chalked up to, well, they were tired and emotional from the game against North Carolina?
I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't know if I'm not going to go and say that it was 100% the reason. I mean, it was a letdown defensively. It was a letdown kind of emotionally, and just the fire that we saw against UNC just wasn't there. Now, I do think that a lot of it probably was, guys were tired, guys were, just physically and emotionally, mentally needing to get back to square one after that game. But, I mean, we can't blame all of that on them. I think Clemson came out ready to play. There was a part in the second half where Clemson was just on fire. They were hitting everything. The momentum was clearly on their side, and they weren't going away. And there was a point where even, we were up, I believe, like 7 or 8. They hit a couple of shots, and they never gave up. So, credit to them for coming out and trying to, be that trap and kind of sneak in and do it. But I think the onus was on our guys to really say, hey, look, that game is done. We faced a huge team in Carolina and came back and won, and that is now in the rear view, and we have to focus on Clemson. Clemson did a great job in forcing our hand and making us play basketball all the way down to the end. But I think in the end, we did just enough to win, and we had Luke Kennard with 25 points, who really was the difference for our side in the victory.
Jason, are you concerned at all about Coach K? Now, this is a topic that, of course, we revisit constantly as Duke fans. But are you concerned about Coach K's use of the bench in the second half against Clemson?
You got a big sigh from me on that one.
I know.
I would.
That was the reaction I was going for.
I would like for him to use the bench a little bit more. I thought Harry Giles especially had some really nice minutes in the first half, and he played very, very sparingly in the second half. Marquise Bolden, didn't play at all in the second half, and really didn't get a lot of time in the first half. Now, I mean, part of that was, I think, Clemson wasn't. I mean, Clemson, they were beating us inside, and I guess, I don't know. I guess Coach K was worried about how we do rebounding wise, because Emil Jefferson is a better rebounder than either of those guys. I would like for him to find ways to work those guys in more and more and more. But I'm not Coach K. I'm not going to, for us to be questioning his rotations, and it seems pretty silly. We're not at practice. We're not with these guys. We spend 2 hours with them every game. and he spends 10 times that much time watching them, evaluating them, and um, if he thinks that Bolden, only plays 2 minutes against Clemson, that's his prerogative. I'm just not gonna get in the way of it. But I mean, one of the things in that Clemson game was they were better than us on the inside. They were terrible from the perimeter. They were not a good shooting team, and they took a lot of bad shots. And their hope, the reason they hung with us for a while, was largely because they were getting a decent number of offensive rebounds, and they were doing a nice job. Thomas was doing a really nice job on the interior of getting good deep position and making some shots in there. This was one of those games. I was saying to Donald right before we got on the podcast, it seems weird to say this in a game where they had the ball with 4 seconds left, down 2, so theoretically with a chance to hit a three-pointer to win it all. I never really was all that worried. Even when they were, cutting into the lead in the second half and the such, I just sort of went, we are so clearly better than them, and they are so challenged offensively. They're just not a good team on offense. That I was like, they're not going to be able to get there. They're not going to. Yeah, and they're not going to get it done.
And they didn't even get a decent look on.
Oh, it was horrible. Yeah, it's unforgivable that their inbounds play took them back toward our basket. 4.5 seconds left or something like that. I forget the exact. It was 4.3, 4.7, whatever it was, on that last play. And the moment they inbounded the ball, headed back toward our free throw line, I was like, well, they're going to throw up there's no chance to get anything but a absolute desperation, horrible shot at that point. And they didn't even really get the shot off because Matt Jones sort of knocked it out of his hands. I don't want to blame the Clemson coaching staff. Maybe they couldn't get anything else, but God, how could you not get something inside the 3-point line or a good look from three? It was poor execution.
That play basically. That play is something you run when you are tied with 15 seconds left in the game, and you know that you can do whatever you want, and the worst that happens is you force overtime. And they had like 5 seconds left. They had, if you look at the stats, they had 13 second chance points, and they had 34 points in the paint. So their play was to inbound the ball where the point guard's catching it 75 feet away from the basket they need to score on to reach overtime or win the game. That's bad planning. And I think that I don't know what they were thinking with that play. But I don't want them to say that it comes down to one play, but that was questionable coaching.
I don't. By the way, I don't know that.
You want to call it.
I don't know that was their. I think that was sort of the safety valve on that play.
Yeah.
I think they. It looked to me like they initially looked for something in the front court, and then they had to go in the back court because they couldn't get anything in the front court. But God, you just got to find a way.
But even in those plays, the safety valve is the way they draw these plays up. Even the safety valve is put in a position that they can do something. Like, again, the safety valve, you pop a safety valve up to 75 feet away from your own basket, that means that you have time. That's time they didn't have. And I think that's why he had to come down and force a shot that it barely left his hands before it was out of bounds. So I think that's not what the play was supposed to be. I think something either executed wrong or they drew up the wrong play.
One thing I want to point out from
that play, I was going to say that I think that the Hail Mary might have been more effective, or had a better chance of succeeding for them than what they did.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out from the game, I thought Duke did a really nice job of moving the ball around. It wasn't a good offensive game. Look, we scored 64 points. It's like one of our lowest outputs of the season. I haven't looked. It might be our lowest output of the season. We haven't played Virginia yet, but we had 13. Yeah, right. We had 13 assists on 21 baskets. That's a great percentage. And I thought Grayson Allen, in a game where he was really struggling, he was just 2 of 10 from the field. Grayson had 5 assists, and there were a couple of assists he had that were really pretty. That led to very easy shots for us at times when we really needed it. I like that in a game where we were struggling a little bit to find an offensive rhythm, we were able to have our passing help us out and get some key baskets. But it's like you guys said, 36 hours after the Carolina game. I'm amazed these guys were even able to get out there and give any effort at all. And they just barely gave effort, but they gave enough to win. So now we're 8-4 in the ACC, and it's anybody's conference.
So let's look ahead then. We'll talk about the games this week. There are two games. One on the second one is on Saturday against a Wake Forest team that we've already seen. The first game is against Virginia, who the last 2 years under Tony Bennett has been one of the most consistent in the conference. Jason, I think you told us that you watched most of or a good chunk of that Virginia Tech game. Do you want to run down kind of what you saw? Because Virginia Tech was able to steal one in overtime against Virginia, and not many teams have gotten to do that this year. So you want to tell us about what Virginia Tech did and how it might translate?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you something. When Virginia Tech won that game, I was surprised because Virginia was the better team, and I credit the home court to really helping Virginia Tech win that contest. The thing I took away from watching that game, and I've seen Virginia play a few other times this year, when he wants to, and it's surprising because he doesn't want to all that often. When he wants to, London Parantis can get to the rim against virtually anyone, and he is incredibly adept with either hand at finishing, at the rim and in the lane. And to me, that's going to be the biggest key for Duke. Down the stretch against Virginia Tech, every time Virginia needed a basket, almost without fail, they went to Parantis. The few times they did something different than that, it didn't work. There was an interesting moment before the ACC season began. Virginia, for a long time, didn't have anyone averaging double digits, which is something that just, naturally on every team, you end up with someone scoring double-digit points. And coming into ACC play, Parantis led the team with about 9.7 points per game. And there was some talk that, oh my gosh, could this be, sort of the first time in forever that an ACC team went all season without having anyone average double digits? Parantis has lifted his scoring average to 12.6 points per game at this point. I want you to think for a moment about how much he's got to score to lift it from less than 10 to almost 13. He's averaging more than 15 points per game in ACC play. And he is really, he is a senior guard. He is their floor leader, and he has taken on more and more and more responsibility offensively for them. That's how they are succeeding at this point. This Virginia team is built on defense, and they don't need to score a lot to win. They are an exceptional defensive team, as they have been for years. We're not saying anything new. They're actually probably a little bit worse this year than they've been in the past. They're not as good protecting the rim. Isaiah Wilkins is their shot blocker, and he actually did. He's only 6'7", but he has incredibly long arms. He did a really nice job against Virginia Tech. He had a couple key blocks. And if not blocks, altering a shot late in that game that almost lifted Virginia to the victory. They're not quite as good protecting the rim. They're not quite as good rebounding as they have been in years past. But they are still an exceptional defensive team. They play that pack line defense, which means they sort of stay a step off of you, so it's hard to drive around them. But they are long and they're very quick and they're good at closing out on you, so it's difficult to get off a three-pointer. It's a tough defense to learn, but they play it exceptionally well. They are also an incredibly deep team. This is a team that plays 10 guys double-digit minutes, and Parantis is the only guy who plays more than 30 minutes. Basically, everyone else on the team plays between 11, 12, and like 25, 26 minutes or so. And as a result of that, you can't sort of look at one guy and say, that's the guy we have to, other than Parantis, that's the guy we have to stop. Or this is a guy that changes the game in this way or that way. They just have a lot of guys who do a lot of different things. And they're a really challenging team. It's going to be a very, very tough contest for Duke. It's always hard to win at Virginia. I'll tell you one thing that I take a little bit of solace from is I don't feel like they're playing great, unbelievable basketball right now. They lost just a few days ago, about a week and a half ago. They lost at Syracuse. They just lost to Virginia Tech. Now, both those games were on the road. and obviously road versus home. But I give Duke a decent chance in this contest, and a victory here would make a huge impact on the ACC standings. Virginia is tied with Duke at 8-4 in the conference. North Carolina sits there at 9-3. The winner of this game is going to have an excellent chance to win the ACC. Both Duke and Virginia still have to play Carolina. So this would be a huge game if we could pull it out. We will need to shoot well from the outside because you're not going to get a lot inside against Virginia. It's just almost impossible to. Donald, you got anything?
Even more so than against UNC?
Yeah. I think they are better interior defense, Virginia, than UNC is. They're not as big as Carolina. They're not as good a rebounding team as Carolina, but they're so long. They help so well. Isaiah Wilkins has great timing on his jumping to block shots and the such. I think it's going to be it's just plain hard to score on Virginia. That's just the bottom line. It is really hard to score on them. Yeah, right. I know.
And the game is at John Paul Jones Arena, so it has the added challenge of being on the road in the ACC.
Yep.
Donald, was there anything you wanted to add about Virginia? I don't know if you've gotten to watch them recently.
I have. I think the one thing I wanted to mention is this. If you recall 2 years ago, when we went to John Paul Jones Arena to face, I guess it was then number 5 UVA, we had just come off of losing, or Rashid Suleiman was just kicked off the team, and that followed like 48 hours later. We traveled to face them in a big time Saturday night matchup and pulled out the victory. It was one of the things that was the catalyst behind us going on to winning the national championship. This is one of those games that, Virginia doesn't match up well with us, I don't think. I don't think it's a good, I don't know how to say this. I don't think it's a good matchup for us in the sense that we love getting out, we love scoring, and this is a team that likes to slow down the game. But I think that might play to our advantage because I think if we play smart, if we play each individual possession and try to maximize what we get out of each possession, then this team can be beat. And I think we could actually win pretty handily if we do that. But if we force up shots, if we play into their defense, which is very suffocating, then I think is going to be for a long night. And the thing about this game is that if we can get some momentum, if we can get like a couple points lead, this crowd will be taken out of it. And I think, and that's not saying anything bad about the JPJ crowd. I think that when we have these kind of leads and we have these kind of big time games, UVA expects to win this game. We expect to win this game. And if we can come out and play with some intensity and be smart with the ball on offense, then that's going to be a very good thing for us. And I think that is going to be the key for his victory. Smart play, taking care of the basketball, and getting great minutes out of everyone who plays. At this point, it doesn't matter if we only have 8 players playing. If they're all going to play very smart, they're going to play well and play within ourselves, then we're going to win this game.
By the way, one thing to remember.
I was going to say it helps that because the pace is slower when you play Virginia, there are probably fewer opportunities for Virginia's depth to beat you, just in terms of like Duke's not going to have multiple guys foul out of the game because there aren't that many possessions.
Right.
Yeah, but so speaking of that, Ken Pomeroy, there are 351 teams in Division One. Ken Pomeroy, 351. Ken Pomeroy says Virginia plays with the 350th slowest pace. So
and yet they're ranked what in Ken Pom?
Number two.
Who's slow?
Second best. That's a great question. Let's check the tempo. Slower than Virginia, St. Mary's.
Huh.
Also a good team.
Also a good team, yeah.
Yeah, ranked team who just lost to Gonzaga in what everyone thinks is the last game Gonzaga could possibly lose this year. So before we get done with Virginia, really quickly, so Duke, I mentioned, we only scored 64 points against Clemson. I looked. That was our lowest scoring output of the year, 64 points. Virginia Tech scored 80 yesterday, but they had 2 overtimes. They were in the low to mid 60s at the end of regulation. Here are the point totals of Virginia's most recent opponents. And then think about the fact that Duke always this season so far has scored at least 64 points. Their opponents scored 55, 66, 48, 61, 54, 49, 54. That's over the past, 8 games or so. Basically, it's almost impossible to reach even 60 points against this Virginia team. So it'll be very interesting to see if they can hold Duke down. If the game is in the 50s or low 60s, that's where Virginia wants it to be. If it gets to 70, I think you have to like Duke's chances a lot.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we'll see if Duke's able to maybe pick up the pace a little bit against them. Although, as you say, it can be a challenge. So is that it for previews, guys? Can we move on to all the other stuff we want to talk about this week?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
So we mentioned, I think Jason mentioned last week that we'd be happy to answer folks' questions if they wanted to submit them either on the forum or sending us a private message. So we did get one question this week, and I wanted to read it because I thought it was a really good question. The listener who asked it is named Steven, and Steven sent Jason a really nice long note. But I wanted to pull the relevant sections out and read them back to you, and then we can sort of talk about this. So Jason says that he grew up he didn't go to Duke. It doesn't sound like anyone from his family went to Duke. He says, I've been a Duke fan for over 26 years now. I'm originally from Alabama, not North Carolina, so I didn't grow up in a pick Duke or UNC town. My story is that my dad had tickets to the 91 Final Four and told me, hey, let's cheer for this underdog team, Duke. So I did, and then after Leitner hit the shot the next year, I was sold. I was 10 years old in 1992. So my obsession grew, but I didn't go to Duke for undergrad. Skipping down, that just to point out throughout his life, he's had no tangible connection to the Duke program. So I have a couple of questions. What do alumni think of non-alumnus Duke fans? I feel that I am quite a rabid, loyal fan. Ask my cat Wojo, etc., etc. My educational path never led me to Duke, but my fandom started way before that. The other question is there something I should say to others when they ask, oh, you didn't go to Duke? You may be thinking that I'm just a crazy poser, but I respect your opinion and really wanted to hear from a source with some real street cred. So, Donald, what can Steven say to other college basketball fans when he talks about his Duke fanhood?
So I have an interesting perspective in this, and thank you, Stephen, for the question. My perspective is this. I was born and raised in Michigan. I was born and raised a Michigan fan. I was not a Duke fan until my friend Shane Battier, friend of the podcast, ended up going to Duke, and I started following his career and starting to learn more about the school as I was going through high school. So I was born, raised, trained to go to Michigan. I went to Michigan football games. I went to Michigan basketball games. I went to school within a stone's throw of the campus. Went to Michigan hockey games. I was involved with the Michigan program. I didn't go to Michigan. And a lot of people think that because I didn't go to Michigan, I shouldn't be a Michigan fan. They call some of these people Walmart Wolverines. And the reason why I relate that to this is we're a small school. We only have 6,600 undergrads. We have about the same number of grad students. And not everyone's going to go to Duke for whatever reason, whether it's, they didn't get in, they couldn't, afford it, they got a scholarship to play somewhere else or to attend school somewhere else and they took that. Or if they just decided they didn't want to go, they just want to remain a fan of the university. I think that is fine. There's a lot of people who like to say that because they went to the school, they're a better fan than anyone who didn't go to the school. But I'm not about to say that somebody who's been a lifelong fan for 30, 40 years is any better or any worse than someone who paid to go to school for 4. And I think that's the same way I my Michigan friends tell me that all the time about my fandom for Michigan and football. And I tell them, look, over 34 years, I've invested tens of thousands of dollars into the University of Michigan. That is not going to replace or be compared to anyone who paid for 4 years of school. And I'm not about to have anybody question my fandom because they went to the school and I didn't. You can only go to one undergrad unless you transfer. And I think that is something that a lot of people kind of get up in arms over, and they shouldn't. I think if you're a fan of the school, if you grew up a fan of the school, if you became a fan of the school, I love that. We need more of that. And I think that's the reason why. I mean, if you think about Duke UNC, UNC has millions of fans. Ain't none of them, half of them go to UNC. And it's the same thing for us. Like, I think that is what makes the rivalry great, is that there's so many fans, not just that went to the school, that really lived the rivalry for 4 years, but they're people who live in Durham, live in Chapel Hill, live in these parts of North Carolina where they pick one or the other, or they live somewhere else and they grew up watching Jordan, they grew up watching Shane Battier and Christian Laettner and Grant Hill and all the stars that come from these two teams. There's no reason why those people aren't as good of fans, if not better fans, than some of the people that went to the school. So I think that's my perspective. Jason, what do you think about that?
I think you can be a fan of the style. You can be a fan of the players. You can be a fan of the coach. You can fall in love with the colors. It doesn't really matter to me. As someone who went to Duke, I have no problem at all, and I don't have a lack of respect for folks who say they're big fans of Duke who never attended the school. The notion that there are lesser fans because they didn't go to Duke, to me, is abhorrent and wrong, and it doesn't match with the number of people out there who watch Duke games and who are passionate about Duke basketball. Some of the biggest fans who have season tickets in Cameron are folks who didn't go to Duke. I may be wrong. I think that Herb, what's his name, Crazy Towel Guy, who is like really, really, really well known as a Duke fan, didn't attend Duke. Isn't that right, guys?
I'm not sure.
Y'all don't know.
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I feel like I've heard that before. I
Yeah.
know for a fact that the number one, biggest, most important Duke website, the Duke Basketball Report, the guy who runs the DBR, Julian King, did not attend Duke. Now, his parents worked at Duke, and he's got a long connection to the school for that reason. But the notion that Julian King is less of a Duke fan because he didn't attend the school is insane. There may be no bigger Duke fan on the planet. It doesn't make any sense to me. And part of Stephen's question was, what do I say to people if they go, "Oh, you didn't go there"? I think you simply say, "Yeah, but I'm still a huge fan. I've been following them since I was whatever age." I love his story that, when Christian Laettner hit the shot in 1992, that he had gone to the Final Four in 91 and rooted for them, and then Laettner hit the shot in 92, and he went, "That's it. That's my team." I'm fine with that. You tell me that story, your bona fides are sold. I'm done. And I love that we have fans like that. It would be terrible if we only had fans among the 6,000 or so kids who actually attend Duke, because believe it or not, there are a lot of people who attend Duke who aren't fans of Duke basketball. They just don't get caught up in the athletics side of the university environment.
And think about the parents. Like, think about the parents of these kids too. Like, my dad was not a Duke fan until I went to Duke. Now he's one of the biggest fans in the world. He's calling me, asking how does he get games on ACC Network when he lives in Texas. Like, my parents are watching the games as religiously as I am. Neither of them went to Duke, but they're now Duke fans. So they paid money to the school. They helped me get an education, and if that's their reason for supporting the team, that's awesome. If their reason is because they have a friend that went there, or a cousin, or anybody, that's fine too. I think there's a number of reasons why people should root for Duke, and going to school is like just one of those 100 reasons.
Yeah. To me, the biggest one is, I was going to say, to me, really quick, to me, the biggest one would be admiring Coach K, admiring the kind of person he is, the way he teaches basketball, his ethics. This is an easy team, in my opinion, to become a fan of, because there's a sense that they do things right, and that they play hard. All the attributes that you would say you would want to design in a program. I think Duke has pretty much all those boxes checked. Sam?
I was going to just add that, when you're talking about pro teams, there are only 30 or so pro teams in each of the major sports in the U.S., but in college basketball, and to a lesser extent college football, there are so many teams. And while that's the case, and so, yeah, you can have if you grew up in Alabama like Steven did, maybe you can be an Alabama basketball fan or an Auburn basketball fan or maybe Georgia, whatever team is nearby. But the best teams in college basketball and college football it's usually the same group of teams every year. So I don't think I'd begrudge anybody from saying, all right, well, that my favorite college basketball team is just going to be one of these teams that's always competitive. So at least I have rooting interest at the top. The way that, and you guys know I'm a great Duke football fan. I love Duke football. But I don't begrudge, Duke people, Duke students, whoever, if they say, all right, well, for a long time, Duke football was nothing worth rooting for. So I followed my hometown, Ohio State Buckeyes or Texas Longhorns or whoever that team may be. Because it is fun to root for the teams that have a chance every year. And in pro sports, other than maybe the Cleveland Browns, everybody kind of has a shot every year because you never know what's going to happen and there aren't that many teams. In college, it seems like it's the same guys every year. So I don't think it's a problem for non-alums or people who aren't connected with the school to like them. And as you said, Jason, there aren't that many people that go to Duke. So if Duke is going to be as powerful of a brand in college basketball and in college sports as it is, it relies on the support of people who didn't go to the school, because from a numbers perspective, Duke is never going to compete with Michigan for eyeballs if we're only talking about people with official affiliations to the university.
And if you think about just who watched the game, I think they said 3.4 million people watched the game on TV. And I think it was Duke basketball that mentioned this, that it was the most streamed game on ESPN ever, with over 250,000 streams on ESPN, Watch ESPN and ESPN3. So if you take that,
there can't be more than 100,000 Duke alumni.
There's
in the
150,000 Duke alumni, period, in the world. So if you think about it, if you divide that in half, there is about 3 million people who are watching this game that aren't fans of the university but are watching the game. So that you can't have these ratings if people who aren't interested, who have no affiliation to these schools, aren't watching.
I can't believe there are only 150,000 Duke alumni in the world. That makes sense. When you think about the number, 2,000 kids per class, a little less than 2,000 kids in a class, and no one lives forever and such. But God, if you'd asked me, don't think, just pull a number out of a hat, the number I would have pulled out would have been much higher than that.
Right.
Yeah. So there you go. So thanks again to Steven for the question. That was really cool. And again, if you want to send us questions to talk about on the podcast, we always welcome them. But the only lines of communication are via the Duke Basketball Report forum. So if you're not on there and you want to ask a question, go ahead, sign up for an account, check out the discussion threads, and then you can send any of us a message either publicly or via the private message service. Let's move on to our Player of the Week discussion. As we do every week, we pick one player as our Player of the Week. I think there are a couple guys you could go with this week. So, Jason, I'll start with you. Who is your Player of the Week for the games against UNC and Clemson?
You ready for this? You're going to be surprised. I'm going off the board. Right. I really thought Frank Jackson had a heck of a week. I thought Frank Jackson had a really, really good week in two very tense, very close games. I thought he did a nice job of control. He had 0 turnovers against UNC. Zero turnovers. He hit big 3-pointers in both games. It defies conventional wisdom that would say, how on earth could you not pick Grayson Allen or Luke Kennard? But I'm getting sick of always picking Grayson Allen and Luke Kennard. So yeah.
I thought that your rule is that you just pick Luke Kennard every week.
Yeah, it has seemed that way. Although lately I've been picking a lot of Grayson Allen. I've been loving his playmaking and the such, and I really came close to picking Grayson Allen. Like I said, he had 5 big assists. I thought really nice assists against Clemson, and he was unbelievable. Best game of the season against UNC. But I'm being weird. I'm being strange. I'm picking one of the guys off the bench. I thought the bench was very, very important this week, and so I'm going Frank Jackson.
All right, Donald.
I will take a page from Jason's normal playbook, and I will go with Luke Kennard. 20 points against UNC, 25 huge points against Clemson, the only player in double figures for us against the Tigers. I think he played wonderfully during both games, and because of his consistent play this week, he is my player of the week.
So Grayson Allen's not going to get any votes this week, which is a shame because he had a really strong week. I'm going to take Jason Tatum for his play down the stretch against UNC. I thought that he obviously showed a lot on offense, also is improving every game as a defender, and his dunk against Kennedy Meeks was pretty ferocious and deserved an and one, and he didn't get the and one, so I want to give him player of the week shout out for that.
By the way,
take away anything.
By the way,
Yeah.
Jason Tatum, 19 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists and 2 block shots against UNC. Whew.
Yeah,
Boom.
so
That's filling it up.
pretty good.
That's filling it up.
That stuffer.
He had a pretty strong day. So I'll take that in his first game in the Duke UNC rivalry. So
Yeah, and he
that was
showed
that
a
was
little bit of
impressive to me.
emotion. He showed some emotion that game as well.
Definitely. All right, let's move to parting shots. I know that there's a lot of little things that we want to unpack. So I think each of us has multiple parting shots we want to hit on this week. So let's go through those quickly. Jason, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you share one, and then we'll do one round and then do a second round.
Okay, so my first parting shot is going to be, oh my God, Northwestern's going to make the tournament. And we've done this before as a parting shot, but I'm so excited for them. They beat Wisconsin at Wisconsin over the weekend. I mean, that's really impressive. Wisconsin was ranked in the top 10. I should have looked it up. I think the last time Northwestern beat a team ranked in the top 10 was never. They may have done it once before. I don't even know. But it's really, really, they're playing good ball. They're doing it. By the way, their leading scorer has mono or something like that. So, once that guy comes back, they're going to be even better. They've won 19 games. They're 19-6, 8-4 in the Big Ten. Northwestern has never, ever, ever in their history won more than 20 games. They've won 20, but they've never won more than 20, and I think you can mark it down. They're going to find their way to at least 2 more wins this season. They're going to set a school record for wins. They are also going to make the NCAA tournament. I mean, am I jinxing them? If they lose 6-7 games in a row, they won't make the NCAA tournament. But as long as they beat Rutgers at home, they're going to make the NCAA tournament. And it's just impressive and amazing. And Chris Collins deserves all the praise in the world. Friend of the podcast, Chris Collins. We've mentioned this before. He was a guest on our show in the past, and he's fabulous and wonderful, and a great member of the Duke coaching tree. I can't say it enough. Northwestern's never, ever, 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 ever made the NCAA tournament, and they're going to do it this year. I know that Mark Few at Gonzaga, and I know that Scott Drew at Baylor are going to get probably all the Coach of the Year votes this year, and no one's going to pay attention. But Chris Collins is the Coach of the Year. Chris Collins is the Coach of the century for getting the worst power conference program in history to the NCAA tournament. Congrats to Chris. I'm jinxing you by saying it early, but it's going to happen. I think it's a done deal at this point.
My boss at my day job is a big Wisconsin fan, and I warned her last week that Northwestern's playing better this year, and she was like, "Oh no, Northwestern's never good. Don't worry about that." So I got to give her a little grief this morning about that. Donald, let's go with your first parting shot.
So my first parting shot is Duke-centered. Mason Plumlee, who was on the Portland Trail Blazers, was traded to the Denver Nuggets over the weekend for Yusuf Nurkic and a protected 2017 first-round draft pick. I believe the Portland Trail Blazers also gave away a 2018 second-round draft pick. So I believe, if this memory serves, I now am the only podcast member who does not have a Duke player playing for the team in their city. Sam has now inherited a Plumlee, and Jason has 2 or 3. I think he has Dunleavy and a couple other guys on the Hawks. The Wizards are lacking, so hopefully this is a good move for Plumlee. I thought he'd been playing very well for the Portland Trail Blazers. Not quite certain what led for them to want to trade him away, but I think the Nuggets are going to benefit greatly from him being on the team. Hopefully, Sam, you will be able to see him a couple times in person. And Washington Wizards, you were on the clock. I think you need a Duke player now so I can go watch games.
I'll tell you, by the way, I was going to say really quick, I'll tell you why Portland traded him. It was two reasons. One is his rookie contract, it comes up at the end of this year. He'll be a restricted
the
free
luxury
agent.
tax. I did remember that one. The luxury tax.
Yeah, and they are in bad shape on the salary cap, and someone is going to pay Mason well above $10 million because he's one of the best. He's a rim protector. He's efficient on offense. He scores really well around the basket, and it's between him, Draymond Green, and Al Horford for the best passing big man in the NBA. He may be the best passing big man in the NBA. He's going to make, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 million dollars a season after this year, and Portland just didn't want to take on that kind of a salary for a team that's already sort of salary cap strapped. And by the way, they're really happy to get that first round draft pick. Portland is stocking up on first round draft picks in what's expected to be a very, very, very deep draft.
I think they have 3 now for the first round next year. Yeah,
they do. And they're my bet is they'll be moving those picks either to move up or to get players or who knows what. But they're going to be a player. They're going to be a player on draft day.
Yeah, I'm excited that I finally get a Duke player here in Denver. I actually had posted something in the forum a couple days ago related to it was some discussion about NBA players, but how in the nearly 6 years that I've lived here, we haven't had a Duke player yet, and there are normally like 15 guys in the league from our university. So the odds said that it had to happen eventually. So now I finally have Mason Plumlee here in town. I think the last Duke guy who played for the Nuggets was Sheldon Williams, and that was quite a number of years ago now. So very cool. I actually mentioned this to you guys. I realized this morning that the Warriors are playing here tonight. So I'm going to try to go to the game because I guess that'll be Mason's debut, and I'll get to see the Warriors. But I need to find some tickets for that. Unless we get the podcast out quickly and someone who has Denver Nuggets tickets wants to hook me up. So yeah, that's pretty cool about having Plumlee here in Colorado. I was going to just quickly mention that I'm going, speaking of attending sporting events featuring Duke guys, I get to go to a Duke lacrosse game this weekend here in Denver because Duke men's lax is coming out to play University of Denver, my other alma mater, which is really exciting because we don't normally get a lot of Duke games way out west out here. So excited to go to that. There's going to be some kind of pregame event with some of the members of the program and stuff like that. So very excited to go see the men's lacrosse team. Jason, did you have another point you wanted to bring up?
You mean another parting shot? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director at North Carolina. I'm gonna try and keep my blood from
Jason,
boiling.
Is this your favorite subject?
It might be. It may be. I'm gonna try and remain calm. Check my pulse. Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director at North Carolina, gave an interview to CBS Sports in which he laid out the defense for Carolina's horrific, terrible academic fraud that went on for 2 decades or more. And his defense can best be summed up by this quote. Again, these are Bubba Cunningham's words, athletic director of UNC. He said, quote, is this academic fraud? Yes. By any normal person standards, yes. But is it academic fraud by the NCAA's definition? I think not. So his defense comes down to semantics. He says that Carolina has been overcharged. This is, if there are little kids listening, please cover their ears. This is bullshit.
Tell them.
It is ridiculous. The hubris that Carolina is displaying here is absurd. Of course it's academic fraud. Everyone knows it's academic fraud. Bubba admits that it's academic fraud. He says, is this academic fraud? Yes. And then he goes on to say, but we shouldn't be punished for it because of these semantics within the rule book. Hey, how about justice? How about fair play? How about actually doing your job and educating the athletes?
Was Bubba Cunningham even at UNC when this was all happening?
No, he was not. He inherited this giant pile.
They bring in a new athletic director, and he can't even stand up and say, all right, I'm here now, new regime. We're going to clean things up. We're going to, we're going to celebrate, finally getting on track and doing things the right way, and not just to keep harping on all that same stuff.
He's a designated fall guy. He's the one that's like, yo, I got the mouthpiece. Let me go ahead and toe the party line right here.
There's no accountability.
The worst part about this scandal, I think, and believe me, the academic fraud and centering it in the African American Studies Department, and the inherent racism involved in that. Those are truly horrific, horrible, terrible things. But the worst part about it is the hubris that Carolina has displayed, the inability to recognize that what they did wrong, accept that they made terrible, horrible, awful mistakes, and that they should face stiff punishment for this. Look at the difference in how they have responded and the way Penn State responded to the Sandusky, child abuse, child rape, whatever you want to call it, scandal. Penn State fell on the sword. Penn State said, NCAA, hit us with whatever you got, and we will accept it. They said, we have done something horrible and terrible and horrific, and we deserve to be punished. And Carolina's attitude is the opposite. Carolina says, we've done something horrible, terrible, and horrific, but you're not allowed to punish us. It's unconscionable. It's shameful. And I'm like at a loss for words. The NCAA cannot punish these guys hard enough. And by the way, I should point out, North Carolina has not been charged with academic fraud. Bubba Cunningham says, it doesn't fall under the NCAA's definition of academic fraud. That's because the NCAA doesn't define academic fraud. Carolina's been charged with improper benefits because they provided classes to these athletes specifically to maintain eligibility. That's improper benefits. That's not academic fraud. SACS, the accreditation folks, those are the ones who said it was academic fraud. The NCAA never even said that. So Bubba Cunningham's defense doesn't even make any sense in that regard. And by the way, the last thing I have on this, and I think I actually did a fairly decent job of maintaining my cool. The Forbes magazine, for some reason, you wouldn't think so, a business magazine, but Forbes, there are a number of columnists for Forbes who have just been beating the drum on this incessantly. They are, I don't know why, but they definitely hate what Carolina did. And so one of the columnists for Forbes magazine, B. David Ridpath is his name, wrote an article about Bubba Cunningham. And after Bubba said the words, yes, this is academic fraud, but not by the NCAA's definition, this columnist for Forbes said, "Excuse me while I pick my jaw off the floor. Bubba Cunningham believes this is not academic fraud. I guess that's the same as O.J. Simpson believing he'll still find the real killers," which I thought was a pretty amusing line.
Are we feeling good, Jason?
Yeah. I feel better having gotten that off my chest.
There
the
you
NCAA
go. All right.
they can't hit these guys hard enough. They got to just kill them. They got to kill them.
Go for it, Donald.
All right, so my second parting shot, I'm sure all you guys out there have seen this at this point. LaMelo Ball, who is the younger brother of UCLA's Lonzo Ball, he had a hell of a game the other night. He had 92 points in a 146-120 victory for his high school team, Chino Hills. It should be noted that there's three brothers. There's three Ball brothers. There's Lonzo. The middle brother is LiAngelo Ball. And then there's LaMelo Ball. LiAngelo scored 72 points in a game earlier this year and did not play in this game due to an injury. And they had just come off their first loss in about a year and a half against Oak Hill the previous weekend. LaMelo Ball decided he was going to go off for 92. 63 points in the second half, 41 in the fourth quarter. Let me tell you his stat line, at least for shots. He was 7 for 22 from three-point range. He was 30 of 39 from two-point range. And if you guys watch some of these highlights, there's some that are a couple minutes long. There's some as long as like 20 minutes long that kind of document this whole thing. A lot of the fourth quarter points were on layups where he kind of cherry picked on offense.
Kinda.
There was, if you see one, there's one. It's really funny. There's one video where it's like 4 minutes long, and I think in that 4 minutes, it just shows what he did for 4 minutes. I think he crossed half court twice, and when I say crossed, I mean his foot was on the line. And then as soon as his foot crossed the line, he was getting the ball back and going in for a layup. And it was kind of funny. I was debating with my friends about whether it was a good game or whether it was kind of a show of unsportsmanship. I know the other team was complaining that Chino Hills was fouling every single time down the court in the fourth quarter, so that they would give LaMelo Ball more chances to score more points and get to 80 or 90. But to his credit, he had 7 assists. A lot of those were in the first quarter. He had a couple of, he threw a couple alley-oops because, again, he was just barely crossing half court for defense. But, it's kind of weird. I don't know how you take this. He's a sophomore. He's verbally committed to go to UCLA, as is LiAngelo Ball. It does not appear that the three brothers will ever play with each other in college. They're all figured to be one and dones. And this is something where LaMelo Ball.
LiAngelo is not that good.
But they expect him to be gone by the time that LaMelo shows up. That is word.
He may declare, but the NBA isn't very interested in him.
I mean, that's neither here nor there. But as the saying goes, they are not expecting LaMelo and LiAngelo.
Lonzo won't be there anymore.
Lonzo won't be there. He's gone.
Lonzo won't be there. That's for sure.
And he should be. He had a hell of a game the other night against Oregon in their epic comeback victory, which was after the DQ&C game. But one thing also, you guys probably have heard of LaMelo Ball because he is the Ball brother that earlier, I guess late in December, they had a holiday tournament where they inbounded the ball to him behind half court. He pointed at the half court line and drilled a three from half court with the nearest defender about 40 feet away from him. So that made the rounds then and now. 92 points, the second highest total in California state basketball history. It's a feat, no matter how you want to slice it, how you want to break it down. 92 points is a feat. So shout out LaMelo Ball, and he's definitely going to be a player to watch in high school over the next couple of years.
In case you were concerned that time wasn't a flat circle, I saw a comment from Taylor King, former Duke basketball player Taylor King, who, if anyone remembers, will laugh also at this comment. I'll paraphrase just that he said something about how he's never seen worse defense in a high school basketball game than to let somebody score 92 points. I imagine you guys remember Taylor King. I imagine other people remember Taylor King at Duke. That's a funny comment, and yeah. I will leave that there. Anything else from either of you before we wrap up here?
So on the balls, this was like some of the most shameful cherry picking I've ever seen.
It was
ridiculous.
Like, I mean, literally, there's a lot of videos. If you go to
embarrassed,
there was one. I'm telling you, it's a 4-minute video where it was just a cam on him in the fourth quarter. And when I tell you he maybe crossed half court twice, and when I say half court, he put his foot across the line, and as soon as that foot touched, he was turning around and getting the ball in offense. It was like hilarious. And some people are like, oh well, I saw he drove, broke down 3 people. Yeah, he did all that too. But 30 for 39 from 2-point. These, like, almost every single one of them were layups. They weren't where he was breaking down on the dribble. There was no half-court offense because both teams combined scored 266 points in a 32-minute basketball game. There was no half-court offense whatsoever. There was no setting up and running shell or running motion or whatever plays you want to call. There weren't even plays on out of bounds. They were just getting the ball and going. I pray for the stamina of those referees because I know they probably ran about 10 miles in that game.
And by the way, Donald, regarding LiAngelo, he's not even considered a top 200 recruit. He's barely a top 200 recruit. I don't think he'll be going to the NBA very quickly. LaMelo's a top 20 recruit in the class of 2019. I mean, it's still early. You don't know how guys are going to develop and the such. Right. But I'll say this: the dude he's not learned to play any defense. That's for sure.
He can always learn defense at UCLA.
Yeah, I don't think so.
All right, I think that's enough from us this week. We'll go ahead and wrap up. Just as a sort of a second reminder, we said it at the top. Happy birthday again to Coach K, who turned 70 today. May there be many, many, many more years of happiness and good health for him. So for Donald Wine, for Jason Evans, I am Sam Klein. This has been episode 71 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Duke Band, take us home.
Bye.